Welcome all. The Williston Development Review Board of June 14th, 2024, Flag Day. My name is Pete Kelly, DRB Chair. If you are a Zoom participant, please sign in by renaming yourself on the participant toolbar. This is a hybrid meeting taking place in Town Hall and virtually on Zoom. All members of the board and the public can communicate in real time. Planning staff will provide Zoom instructions for public participation before we begin. All votes taken at this meeting will be done by roll call vote in accordance with the law. If Zoom crashes, the meeting will be continued to June 28th, 2022. Let's start by taking a roll call attendance of DRB members participating in the meeting. Paul Christensen.
Present.
John Hemmelgarn.
Present.
Scott Riley.
Here.
Dave Saladino is absent. Dave Turner.
Here.
Nate Andrews.
Here.
And the chair is present. With that, I'll turn it over to Simon for Zoom instructions.
Right, thank you. So good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Development Review Board. Please take a moment to rename yourself to ensure the name is accurate. You can do this by clicking on the participants icon at the bottom of your toolbar, hovering over your own name, clicking rename, and then typing it in. Or you can message me in the chat and I will rename you. If you're in person and you have a device like a laptop or a phone, please make sure you keep the microphone and speaker off to avoid any feedback with our AV system. And you also don't need your camera because you will be picked up if you're speaking and also on the meeting hour. For those people on Zoom, we have a range of functions on the toolbar along the bottom of the Zoom window. On the left-hand side, we have the mute button, which turns your mic on and off. Please keep yourself muted when you're not speaking. We have the stop-start video button. Video is optional. We have the chat button. Please use that to message me if you need technical assistance. We also have the reactions button. This is what you should use if you would like to speak during public testimony. Please raise your hand or wave in your Zoom window and we'll call on you to speak. Please don't use the chat for testimony as you do need to speak it. We will be using screen share this evening so that everyone can see the same documents. We do recommend side-by-side mode. Your Zoom should generally default to that automatically. But if it doesn't, you can switch to it by clicking the view options next to the green rectangle at the top of your screen, scrolling down and clicking side-by-side mode. And you also have the option of adjusting the slider to change the respective size of the video or the screen we're sharing. And lastly, if you do have a bad internet connection, there's a few things you can try. You can try turning off your video. You can try closing other browser tabs or computer programs, or you can try using your telephone for your speaker and microphone. And you do that there by clicking the up arrow, clicking the leave computer audio, and then dialing back into the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Okay, first on the agenda is the public forum. This is an opportunity for the public to address the board on any issues that are not on tonight's agenda. People here in the room, are there any comments? And if you're participating by Zoom, please raise your virtual hand if you would like to speak and address the board.
So we have no hands raised.
Okay. Next up, item number 2 on the agenda, the public hearing. We have 4 items on tonight's agenda. We have a certificate of appropriateness, that's first up. Then we have DP 16-05.4 Allen Brook Development. Then we have DP 22-10 JC Properties LLC. And then we have continued from the May 10th hearing, Appeal 22-02, which we will hear at the end of the meeting. I will be recusing myself for DP 16-05.4, the Allenbrook Development. My employer, DEW, has a business relationship with an entity that Al Senecal is a partner. And so due to that relationship, I'm going to recuse myself from that one. And Mr. Hemmelgarn, if you will take the helm on that, that would be appreciated. First up is HP 22-03, the Certificate of Appropriateness. Is the applicant present?
No, they're not here tonight.
They're not, okay. Who from staff is going to read this one?
I will be reading this one. For whatever reason, it's not letting me share, like it doesn't
Okay.
pop up my apps.
You're not hosting, are you?
I'm a co-host, but when I
Are you
click, so when I'm clicking share screen,
Oh.
it doesn't show my tabs. Simon, are you able to screen share my staff report?
Yeah, I'll try making you the host as well.
Let me-
Here we go.
Well, anyways, this is a request for a certificate of appropriateness for a roof replacement at 8099 Williston Road. This property is located in the National Register Historic District of the Village Zoning District. And the main roof is currently slate. Some of the other roofs on the property are architectural shingles. The separate barn has a standing seam roof. That's going to stay the same. This property is listed on the Historic Sites and Structures Survey. It's a circa 1825 house with a gabled front and clapboard siding. The HAC recommended that changing the slate roof to architectural shingles complies as proposed. What the bylaw says is fairly vague. Respect the original character and period of the building. So in their interpretation of this, because it is a gable front and that slate roof is minimally visible because it's a 2.5-story structure, they determined that removing the slate and replacing it, it would be minimally visible to invisible from the public road. So we're recommending that you approve it with the recommendation. They chose 2 colors, a slate gray and slate stone gray, or a similar gray. These shingles have some variation to emulate a natural slate rather than being monotone. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Emily. Any questions for staff from the DRB? I'm just asking if you have any questions for staff. You have a comment? Go ahead.
This is a historic building. Part of what makes it historic is the slate roof. It was built that way. The slate roof is integral to the building. The hack has got it wrong. I think the staff's got it wrong. That roof should not be touched. It should be repaired, put back into place. There are people out there who do that. If you went to Burlington, and we're not in Burlington, but if you went to Burlington, was requesting the black out of this is part of this. It's part of what makes this building special. And to change it out, tear off a slate roof, which would properly cared for should last forever. It is a travesty. So, my opinion.
Actually, it lasts about 155 years because my one in Norfolk, I replaced at 155 years.
I've got a bunch of them in Burlington, and they do take maintenance, but not a lot. And I know they had a tree fall on it. I know there.
But like you say, this is distinct to the house.
It's part of the house, it's part of how they built these things. It's gonna cost them as much.
Were the porches slate at one point? I'm just curious. Because if the porches were slate at one point, who the hell approved that change?
It was probably done back when they weren't worried about this stuff.
Ah, okay.
After the fact.
Yeah, I doubt those porches are original, though. I doubt those porches are original to the building,
Okay.
but I don't know. There's a lot we don't know.
Those used to be add-ons and ripped off routinely, but the slate, I think, should be replaced, if not maintained, one way or the other.
Was the site roof damaged by the tree?
I think it did sustain some damage, and they're going through an insurance claim process for the tree that fell and damaged the roof, and I think some of the porch as well.
Yeah,
What precedent is there with other requests from buildings in the historic district that have had similar requests to remove the slate?
It varies. So more recently, there have not been many requests to replace roof materials. Historically, before the zoning was changed, some things did go from slate to another material. Some people have changed their roofs without the benefit of a permit. So there are many properties in the village that historically would have had a slate that have become shingles or standing seam metal with or without a permit, or under what zoning is to be researched.
I don't recall in the years I've been on the board ever having a request to remove slate, replace something else.
Okay. So Paul, you've made your position clear, if I heard you correctly, that to deny and repair.
Or
David
deny or
Turner?
repair or replace with slate again.
David Turner?
Kind of up in the air on it because of some of the shingle roof on the house. I do agree with Scott on the fact that it does make the house from its time error. I'm fine with the shingles.
Nate?
I think I would like to see the slate stay. If there was actually some reason that it could not stay, like you couldn't find slate to replace the little bit that was damaged, or there was no availability. I don't want someone to have a leaky roof, but I would agree that a large part of the character of this building being historic is the roof. So, and at least at this point, I would say I'd like to see an attempt to keep it.
John, position?
I'm uncomfortable replacing the slate. A slate roof, I know you said 155, but, our rule of thumb is shingles 25, metal 50, slate 100 years. It goes like that. And, and I know that, when I see an old building, you say, hey, that's a slate roof, that's an old building. I don't have a problem with it being different. In fact, I think it's better if it's different than the porch roof, because I think the porch is probably not as old as the house, and it helps the house stand out. So I guess I'd want to see a much stronger argument on why it's not feasible to do the slate.
Okay, staff, help me out. Do we, on a certificate of appropriateness, do we vote on that, correct?
You do, in this instance, and especially because the applicant is not here, I'd recommend you continue. I can relay this information in the meeting recording to the applicant, and they can come back to another meeting.
Great. Okay, so we're going to continue this until June 28th, and we will continue the discussion at that time. Okay, next up is DP 16-05.4 Allen Brook Development.
You a chin.
Okay, I'm going to recuse myself. I've had it. John?
Okay, thank you. So the folks that are representing the applicant, to state their names and addresses for the record.
Sure. Brian Birch, Albert Development, 31 Commerce Ave, South Burlington.
And I'm Al Senical, Allenbrook Development, 31 Commerce Ave, South Burlington.
Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
So staff, Emily, I think this is yours.
This is a request for discretionary permit to amend final plans and reconfigure the number of 1 and 2 bedroom units in buildings B1 and C1 in Phase 1 of Cottonwood Crossing. This application includes no architectural modifications to building B1, and it does include changes to building C1. There are no site plan changes proposed. Within Phase 1, the number of dwelling units will increase from 42 to 49, but because they are 1 bedrooms, the overall dwelling unit equivalents will decrease from 37.5 to 32.5. Remembering that a studio or 1 bedroom unit is half a dwelling unit equivalent for the purposes of density and growth management. Overall, within Cottonwood Crossing, the total number of units will increase from 202 to 219, but the dwelling unit equivalents will remain 173.
Due to what?
Huh?
It ends with due. Due to what?
Oh, that should be a capital U for DUE, dwelling unit.
Oh, okay. Never mind.
All good, all good. So this property is about 16.9 acres, located in the mixed-use residential zoning district where it has access to state and town roads. It is subject to design review, however, this application specifically did not need Conservation Commission review. Staff is recommending that you take testimony and close, deliberate tonight, and approve this application with findings and conditions as drafted. There are some conditions recommended from the HAC about architectural elevations for building C1. The DRB could choose to retain final plan review or continue the hearing for revised elevations if they didn't want to turf all those conditions off to staff review of final plans. This is the first time the DRB is approving this request. Cottonwood Crossing has a lengthy approval process dating back to 2007, but more recent permit approvals related to amending the architectural design for phases 1 and 2 in 2019. The Historic and Architectural Advisory Committee did comment on this application on June 7th, and their conditions are recommended and included. Public Works and Fire also commented, and their memos are included. No public comment letters were received at the time of mail out or by tonight, this evening, June 14th. In terms of the zoning standards for the mixed-use residential district, there's no changes to building footprint, setbacks, or building height, no changes to proposed use, and no changes to the site layout as it relates to development pattern standards. I do include here a note about vested rights, non-conforming lots, uses, and structures. So last week, the select board chose to warn a hearing on the Taft Corners form-based code. And starting this Thursday, June 16th, both the existing bylaws and the draft code will become applicable during the zoning vortex while the select board is reviewing the draft code. This application was filed prior to the select board warning a hearing. So this application is vested in the current bylaws. And therefore, staff discussion about growth management and density are based on the current bylaws as if form-based code does not exist. I do note that as proposed for form-based code, there are some ways that the new standards of form-based code, new administration process for growth management could impact the future phases for Cottonwood if they choose to make any significant amendments. Cottonwood Crossing is proposed in 5 phases. Tonight, we're looking at phase 1, where a building is under construction, building C1 is proposed but not yet constructed, and another commercial building, A1, is proposed but not constructed. Phase 2 has completely built out. That's where Community Bank and Junior's Pizza is located. And then phases 3, 4, and 5 are all residential. They have conceptual approval for street layout and building footprints, but no architectural and site-specific permits yet. So substantial change in vested rights. There are some specific findings and conclusions for the DRB. In summary, changing the approved number of units or bedrooms is a substantial change, which does void a development's vested rights. And when vested rights are being looked at, the DRB looks at conformities and nonconformities. And if something is nonconforming with the bylaws, the DRB has the right to require a correction of that nonconformity, but only if the change is reasonably proportional to the scale of the proposed development. And when the DRB reviews a substantial change, they're limited to the scope of what's changing, except for the nonconformities. So in this case with Cottonwood, they're doing a fairly minor change, just interior floor plan for the residential units, and then some architectural elevation changes. So it's fairly minor when considering all 5 phases of the development. But it was approved under an old growth management score in 2016 with 88 points. And then in 2019, the growth management criteria changed, the growth management rules changed. And today, if they were proposing Cottonwood fresh, it would probably score something around 68 points. And this is no fault of their own, because some categories were reduced from 15 to 10 points. A new category was added, and the energy efficiency criteria got much stricter. So while they're changing the number of units, I still think this upholds the offer housing choices score. If they were to come to the DRB and propose a more significant change that threatens the growth management score or wouldn't meet the 30-point minimum, then this would be an issue. But for tonight, I think that the DRB can approve this amendment with the score of 88 points. And what follows is a summary table where I compare their score under the old criteria and what changed in the new criteria and what an approximate score would be. So growth management, they scored 88 points and 173 DUE in March 2016 with 58 affordable dwelling unit equivalents and 119 market. I have drafted findings and conclusions stating that this amendment upholds the overall score and continues to uphold 18 out of 20 points for housing choices. Final plans must specify which buildings and phases the affordable units are anticipated, as well as acknowledge the slow build provision. In summary here, there hasn't been a detailed accounting done for Cottonwood about the affordable units, how many need to be affordable at 80, 100, 120%. And in 2019, that new slow build rule came into play. So rather than allocation expiring, and rather than having to build only what's available in that fiscal year, you can build everything across your schedule, but they lapse into slow build after 5 years. So in summary, I did this analysis and I prepared an Excel table, both to help the applicant with planning future amendments, planning where the affordable units will fit into their project, and help staff with the administration of the growth management score and the slow build provision. And what follows is a summation of their commitments that they made at growth management. Off-street parking and loading. This one's pretty simple. We're recommending standard conditions, and the final plans must include the location of long-term bicycle storage. They provide a shared parking analysis that supports 267 vehicular spaces. There's a mix of commercial and residential uses with garage parking and surface parking shared between not only the buildings in phase one, but a shared parking analysis looking at all of Cottonwood Crossing. Density transfer of development rights. So in the mixed-use residential zoning district, the net density is 7.5 DUE per acre, and it can go up to 15 DUE per acre with the transfer of development rights. This property did receive a transfer of development rights I believe that should say in 2008, not 2018, from Keystone Estates. So overall, there are 173 dwelling unit equivalents complies with the density. In fact, there might be about 3.5 dwelling unit equivalents that could go to this project if they were to amend in the future and activate that remaining density. Design review. So the HAC recommendations are included as condition number 3. They noted in their review that there is a drawing style difference between the 2016 originals and the amendments shown tonight, with the shading that shows the depth of the structure. But overall, they disliked the new design because it lacked contrast due to the change of ratio of primary and secondary facade materials. What follows are some side-by-side comparisons. In general, the original elevations had more brick and specified a metal siding shingle. Now the new ones have more clapboard siding, less brick, and the west elevation above the parking garage access, the west elevation that has the pedestrian entrance has fewer windows on it than the original. Signs and public art, and note here that Cottonwood Crossing does have a master sign plan, and all properties in Cottonwood must come into compliance, particularly with the portable sign sandwich board sign requirements. And impact fees, they're assessed at the time of administrative permit. Impact fees were paid for building B1 with permit number 20-0098. So only the new units in that building will be subject to the impact fees, whereas building C1 has not received any administrative permits and would be due all its impact fees. And this accounting can be done at the time of administrative. Before I close, I'll quickly whiz through the findings of fact, which summarize the growth management score, the dwelling unit allocation, the number of units that need to be affordable at the various levels to uphold 20 out of 20 points, the transfer of development rights, as well as condition of approval number 3A, which is the HAC recommendations, where they look at each building elevation, as well as the cornice supports and private balconies and the ledge depth for the building. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. So, is there anything you'd like to add to that summary, or?
Well, that was really thorough. We weren't expecting this big of a staff report, but our changes, this request came about because we recently rented the B2 building. That's the building that's occupied now. It's a 3-story mixed use. And that building was built with 4 studios, 8 one-bedrooms, and 22 bedrooms. So that's 32 units total. And we found that actually all 32 rented immediately, which was good. But we found the requests for 1 bedroom far exceeded the request for 2 bedrooms. And, that kind of surprised us, but, it's what we found. And, at that time we were building the B1 building, and we talked to our architect. That's the building that's under construction now. We talked to our architect and asked if some more 1-bedroom units could be added without making any change to the building. And, he did some revised floor plans that we included in the packet. And we were able to, by decreasing the number of two-bedroom units, we were able to increase the number of one, end up with 4 units total, 4 more units total in that building, without making any change to the building itself, outside. Then we then asked them to look at the C1 building, which is going to be the next building we build. We're hoping to break ground on that building this fall. So the C1 building was approved with 1 one-bedroom unit and 17 two-bedroom units. And without making any change to the footprint, we were able to change that so it now has 15 one-bedroom units and 6 two-bedroom units. So it went from 18 to 21, but the actual overall impacts, as Emily described with dwelling unit equivalents, has gone down. So with the 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom configuration change, we feel like the impacts have decreased over the site. And you know, there are some permits to amend and some allocation numbers to submit to Public Works, which we are we've started, and I think there's a approval condition which requires that, so you know, we can make that change. So the second part of our request has to do with the architecture of the C1 building, and you know, really we didn't see it as much of a change. We did change architects, you know, over the past 6 years, and so 6 years ago, or 2016, we were in for 5 buildings. We had this big project. Cottonwood was new, and we submitted a giant set of plans with elevations and floor plans for you know, 5 new buildings, and this was one of them. But the building was conceptual at that time. I didn't submit with their application, but this was the floor plan for the C1 building in 2016. It's just shapes. It just shows you the blue are 2-bedroom units, and then this yellow is a 1-bedroom unit. But there was no bathroom layout. There were no bedroom layouts. No kitchens drawn. But the architect did draw this beautiful rendering of what the building would look like. But it wasn't based on like an actual interior layout. So, you know, we want to build this building this fall, so we've now developed a detailed set of floor plans for this, for a majority 1-bedroom units. Those floor plans have looked at where the bathrooms are going to be, where the bedrooms are going to be. And so the windows and door locations all have to work with that. And so we gave this original elevation to our architect, and we said, you know, here's the building that's approved. You know, we want you to design it like you know, like it was drawn in 2016. And so with the changes, you know, the doors and windows did move, and so it couldn't be a perfect match of what was originally approved. And we also did look at adding more brick, less brick, and you know, cost was a consideration. You know, this building cost maybe almost twice as much today than it did in 2016. And, you know, that's something, you know, we need to be concerned about too. So, but we think this building is pretty close to what was originally approved. There was a hack meeting on this last week. We didn't get notice about that meeting. We would have been there. We've never missed a hack meeting. We didn't know there was one last week. So, I think a lot of these issues could have been worked out with them, but, we'll have to work them out tonight with this board. So I guess we just want to go through their recommendation and comment on each one if you guys are up for that.
The other thing we wanted to just let you know that the brick color hasn't changed, even though the pictures, I mean, there's no question when you look at the original picture and you look at this picture, it's kind of looks like a different building, but the bricks are going to be the same. The siding is going to be the same. We're going to go with the dark gray siding. We'll probably go with a darker gray trim up on the top and around. We're still using the same brick. We've reduced the brick a little bit, mostly because, obviously cost, but mostly because just to accommodate the new layout where, you know, the original drawing showed decks, I believe, on the west side. Well, the way this one lays out, the decks are not going to be on the west side. And then the other reason, you know, one of the things was a blank wall. And we can go over all of those items, but the blank wall is because there's bathrooms and closets on that wall, and it's very difficult to get a sizable window. We could put some smaller windows. We did look at it with the smaller windows, and it didn't seem to look much better, so we just left them out. But we certainly would be willing to work with you guys to take your recommendations to make some changes to things. And we certainly do not want to take away from the quality that we've already put into the project by putting in a sore thumb here. So we're using the same siding, same brick, and we just maybe have to manipulate a little bit to make it all come together.
Yeah, for whatever reason, there was, a problem with the printing of the colors. So the brick looks really dark and really red, where, that's why we brought a sample of the brick. We couldn't get the color to print out just right, apparently. And then the other thing is you're comparing a 3D drawing from 6 years ago to a really a 2D drawing. So there's, so 3D drawing obviously looks nicer with their shadows and.
I got to interrupt you and tell you, Al, I am incredibly disappointed that you didn't do the 3D walk around rendering that you did 6 years ago. I mean, I was looking forward to that this whole week.
We didn't think, we still didn't think
Bring
it
it
was
in.
gonna be that big of a deal. to be honest.
Everybody, nobody here remembers it.
I still have it. We could have put it on the screen.
Bring in the price tag too.
No need to show that right now.
So I guess I'll start with a couple of questions
Sure.
here. So on the C, it's the C1 building that's in question here.
Yes,
On the other hand, you've made similar changes to B1, but did not change the elevations. Is that correct?
that's correct.
So the B1 is still going to have the same proportions, the same elements in the same places as
Yes, the decks,
originally.
we changed the interior only. The decks are, we have one apartment that doesn't have a deck because we didn't add a deck to the exterior. We just didn't want to change anything on the exterior of B1.
Right,
It was
and I think-
already in
Right,
progress.
and I think that's great.
Yeah.
I mean, this board, we try to do a thorough job
Sure.
of reviewing these projects and improving them. And, I would say, at least speaking for myself, my expectation is that they get built the way we looked at them and approved them. And I appreciate you taking B1 and not changing that.
Sure.
I guess one question I have about B1 though is I'm assuming that the floor plan was equally developed on that at the time of the original proposal, or did you have a full laid out plan there with the units
We had more of a layout plan
We had more
for,
of a layout.
for B1?
Because B1 and B2 were very similar. We did both of those at the same time. And then we only built B2, financial reasons.
I see. So therefore, you did not have to change the elevations of B1
That's correct.
as you came through and put it into construction because you had a more detailed plan in place
It only-
at the time of permit.
yeah, it only affected 2 units on each floor. So, 4 units total. Whereas C building, we really, we went from 1 bedroom, 17 2 bedrooms to 15 1 bedrooms, 6 2. So it's really, C building was, the interior was completely, well, we didn't really have an interior to start with, but it was a big difference.
Right. What I'm getting at here is I'm hearing that there's 2 pieces here that are causing changes to the elevations. One is this switch from predominantly 2-bedroom units to predominantly 1-bedroom units. But the other one is that the fact that at the time of the original review, there was a much less detailed floor plan that's been developed further, and that even if you hadn't changed the unit types, would you be in front of us asking for changes to the elevations?
On B1,
On C1?
yes, we would, because, upon further review of the actual floor plans with kitchens and bathroom locations, it just didn't work where those decks were because there was no apartment layout with those decks. It's just an elevation, a raw elevation. And we can show you guys the floor plans that we had in that packet when we got it approved. Just a
Understand.
footprint. Yeah.
So, I guess before I keep talking more, I'm going to open this up to other members of the board to ask questions or to express opinions about those changes. So, what do you think about the changes to the elevations? Is in Scott's terms earlier,
I don't have an issue with it.
did that get it right or not?
I mean, what I see based on these pictures, which like you said, I recognize it's not a great comparison because they are different. I think that the hack generally got it right in expressing their concerns, and that's because you guys did a really good job and set the bar high for yourself here. And I think it would be helpful for me to see images of these new building designs, maybe next to the existing buildings. And I don't think it's unreasonable what Hack is asking here, to at least just be able to see it. If we're looking at it next to the other existing buildings in the same color format would be helpful.
Yeah.
And again, I think it's because you guys set the bar high for yourself here and people like what's there now and don't want to see a change. And I don't think you do either, but I do hear what they're saying here.
And so we are, we got the staff's, or the HAC's comments as an approval condition, and we're okay with making some of those. We can talk about that, but there's a few that aren't, we don't think are possible. And if we went to that meeting, we could have probably discussed it with them, but.
Okay. So I'm gonna allow the other members of the board to kind of weigh in if you'd like, or we can go through.
No,
this.
I agree too, that I think the hack got it right with the things. And I'd like to see a little more brick, probably like the initial drawings in 2016 were, instead of the clapboard, and the entranceway is a little more pronounced. Was on the bottom, the fieldstone in the 2016, it looks like it was more of a golden color. And now it looks like you've gone to a gray color. It's,
Well, I think the.
is that
the
just a
colors-
drawing thing?
Yeah, I mean, all the colors on that are totally different, so we brought in the siding and the brick to show you that we're using the same color brick, the same color siding that's on B1 and B2.
So same stone as
Rock stone as well, so.
I'm going to support the applicant on this one. It's a common problem that as soon as you use a different printer or a different monitor, the colors all look different.
Yeah.
But I think I appreciate that you're still using the same palette of materials, is what I hear you saying. So I think if you saw the purpley red on the original drawings, that's what's still going to be there.
Yes.
And I assume they're similar to what you've been building out there now. So I think the colors themselves are probably not the issue here. It's really kind of the mix of them and the proportions and whatnot that the hack is bringing.
On 2016, under the samples, though, like the brick says brick, and under the 2022, it says brick veneer. So was it brick and now it's brick veneer, or?
It's brick.
It's brick. Okay.
This is, I'll pick this up from the job.
Grab the job.
10 minutes before the
I
meeting.
drove off a piece of siding with no show. I said, I gotta show these guys what we're using. The same
We'll see if they
stuff.
report the
job.
But I can't imagine asking you to put windows and closets or things like that. I think that's unreasonable, but I think that what I want to see in the pictures is depth, and I understand that's because, like you said, they're two-dimensional.
So there is the same depth. I mean, the brick
Okay.
sticks out the 4 inches.
Yep.
There'll be a cap on top of the brick, similar to what's on buildings B1 and B2. And then the siding is set back that, 4.5 inches or so. So that there is that same depth. You'll see that. It'll make that change from the first and second floor where the brick goes up.
Yep.
And then it'll step back where
That's
where
helpful.
the siding comes in. And as far as the timbers that were brought up, we agree, we should have looked that over a little bit. They weren't evenly put, so we will make sure we do that. I mean, and if it's size, I mean, there was no size or dimension put on the first or the second drawing, so it's hard to say what that size is or was. So we'll make sure we get a pretty hefty, piece of hemlock or wood to put up there.
So Paul, did you have a comment?
I want windows in the closets.
All right.
So little tiny ones?
You do realize that you could actually put that in as a marketing feature to the women, so they can sit there and say, you don't have to take your clothes outside, you can actually see the daylight in your closet.
We'll put a closet light in, but what we wouldn't be able to do is put a window. It's very tricky, but we'll put a window over the toilet in the bathroom so that it'd be.
I think there are plenty of options here. What I'm going to suggest here from my seat is that we continue this hearing. We give you the opportunity to meet with the hack, since they're more involved with these design pieces than the board here is, so that we're not kind of going through these recommendations of the hack and kind of going through the same thing that they went through. I think you're right, that you should have an opportunity to speak with them, to go through the process with them. Personally, I agree that I believe they got it right as well. I think there's proportional issues here that are not up to the quality that you showed initially.
Well, we are in for a new review. It's not an administrative change, so we're before the board. And
It is, but
if we're gonna be held to a standard that was in the past, then shouldn't all builders in town be held to standards that?
They
I mean-
should be held to the standards that they got with the original permit. And at this point, I feel that that's not really what we're not looking to change that overall level of quality.
Well, we're not either, and I think there's something going on here that, we're saying we're using the same quality materials that we put on the first building, the same stone, same brick, same siding.
So,
And now we're having.
but
to
short
have-
of giving an impromptu architectural lecture on proportionality and
Yes,
mix of materials and
sure.
dominance of one piece over the other and other kinds of composition and whatnot,
Which would be an opinion.
which would be an
An
opinion.
architect's opinion versus another architect's opinion, but other.
True. So again, the five opinions that are up here
Yes.
are probably not equal to the five opinions in the audience right now. So we need to be convinced that you've done something that's equivalent.
Well, could we go through the hack comments, because we agree with some of them, and we can make some of those changes. There's a few that just can't be made, and there's a reasonable explanation for why they can't be made. And we continuing wouldn't be the end of the world for us, but we are pushing to have this project in the ground before winter. So we're up against like a tight timeline.
And another.
We meet
question-
again in 2 weeks, right?
Is that when it would be, 2 weeks? Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, but we could have the hack within that 2-week period?
yeah, the hack could look at it on June 21st. Well, it would be tight because we would, need materials by Friday. Have the hack
That's going to be a challenge,
on the 21st.
because we really would like to see some elevations, I think, that are more,
How come we weren't warned that we were supposed to have this information to the hack? And now we have to.
That
come
was
in
my
here.
error, and I apologize for that. It was supposed to go on their agenda, and it didn't, and was realized at the last minute. So in an expediency of time, I recommended that they look at it and put their recommendations to the DRB rather than continue this whole hearing for hack review at the future meeting.
Well, we're running into another problem because we've combined these two. We have a building B2 that we're hoping to be able to put online August 1st with the apartments. And I'm not sure how this is gonna work. I mean, it looks like we might be able to pull something.
Well, I think if we agreed on some of these conditions, there's still final plan review required. I was gonna ask that we have the DRB approve the project with conditions tonight. And then we would submit final plans that incorporate those conditions. And I was gonna ask if we could submit that to Matt and Emily to planning and zoning. A lot of times they can sign off on that without having to warn a public hearing that, would probably be in like September. We're just guessing when the next one would be, but, we're agreeable to half the HAC's conditions, such as adding some more windows, revising the timber location, enhancing the canopies over the entrance. A lot of the major things they said, we agree with. There's a few that they asked for doorway side entrance. You'd have to kind of look at the floor plan to see, why that couldn't be added, because it's the entrance to the building is kind of a narrow hallway. So the double door with the glass is as large as, that hallway can fit. The original building had side lights on the glass, but the original building also didn't have a defined floor plan. So that was one thing we were going to ask to be struck from the condition, is the doorway side light. And that shows up in condition A and B. Private balconies, we were they asked that we should add some privacy screens. We'll do that. So I think we're in agreement on C and D. And then on E, it just says, confirm the facade depth. It looked really two-dimensional on the elevation we submitted compared to the drawings 6 years ago, which were much more 3D. But like Al just said, that brick will stick out 4-inch above the clapboard, and then there will be a 6-inch limestone cap that separates the brick and the clapboard on the second and third floor. So we really agree with them on that. So we agree with their conditions, with the exception of the size of the windows.
And we've got that same cap and dimensional setbacks on the two buildings that we built already. It's our intent to do the same thing here, so. We may not have detailed that as well on the architecturals as we.
But we can detail out in the final plans. And those are pretty minor changes. We think that can be, we can ask them to kind of revise, tweak the colors, and we think we can get this building pretty close to what it was originally. I mean, that's what we want to build.
So to reiterate what I think I'm hearing you say, that if we approved these conditions, number 3, as written with the exception of the door side lights, you would be okay with that?
I think so, because
Yes.
And then you would submit the revised elevations that were consistent with these, with
Yes.
final plans, that the board could retain that approval,
Yep.
or we could defer to staff. And that would be our choice. Which we could just debate in deliberations. What do you guys think? Should we continue this, or should we move through it?
I'm okay with moving through it. I mean, we still have a chance to look at everything, and, it sounds like you guys agree with what the hack said, really. I don't think there's any, it's just,
Well, we only agreed because it was our intent to do
Yeah.
most of that anyway. I mean, we're not changing that cap. We
It really
show it
just comes down to the
as efficiently as we should,
Right, I mean, yeah,
We
I mean, I
we
could
didn't
give,
think we were gonna put little toothpicks up for the timbers. We'll have some pretty sizable timbers, but again,
So the only issue that's really of question is 3A,
3A.
correct?
no,
The more window stuff. That's the only question that you have.
I did have one other question. It's like related to the growth management stuff. You want me to just ask that now? Okay.
Brian, I want to kind of put this elevation piece
Okay.
to rest. I think we want to get to the other stuff in a minute, but I don't want to get it too mixed up. So there was discussion of continuing this to allow you to submit a revised elevation. I understand what you're saying about your schedule. But Paul, I'm not sure I understood what you were getting at when you said they're in agreement with everything except 3A. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, the question I'm trying to figure out is that if we say, yeah, go ahead and start up on building C, and then you say we're going to retain the final, and for some reason, the hack issue of that dead wallish space that they keep talking about
Okay.
suddenly becomes an issue,
That's going to be
yeah.
as I've suggested it, that would become our review when they submit final plans as to whether that's still a dead wall or not a dead wall.
Well, I was basically trying to figure out is the only thing that's really going to be our issue is going to be 3A, really, because it sounds like they're agreeing to everything else.
So if I can jump in here, 3A, we said that we cannot do the doorway side lights. However, we can do the enhanced, we'll enhance the entrance, and we'll take a look at the additional brick to maybe widen the brick out, less sided, that kind of stuff.
I think
But we can't do the side lights because they just don't fit.
Well, I understood that part because basically I was going to that, I wasn't gonna vote for that part.
And we'll even throw in the bathroom windows on the second and third floors, only we can't do it on the first floor. Because of the entrance. So,
Did
you know,
you, Scott, did you want to say?
Well, well, one comment is that, to me, it sounds like 6F does one or the other, in terms of timing. You know, if you agree to do it tonight, and it comes back for final for approval, it's still coming before the board.
Well, I think there is a difference in that essentially what we're saying, if we approve this with these conditions, is we're looking at that elevation in the future, but that allows them to move ahead with the new floor plan configuration and
I would assume that would happen anyways.
well, it's happening, kind of, as we speak. We didn't think it was gonna be that big a deal to change two, you know.
I mean, there hasn't really been any discussion amongst the board
No,
about
there hasn't.
not doing the
But now
floor.
that these are together, if you don't get the approval, we won't be able to open August 1st.
I will add, I probably shouldn't even say this, but 10 years ago, on the second building that we built over in Finney Crossing, 88 Holland, this exact same subject came up with the dead wall with the little, we ended up putting, if you go over there and look at it, there's a whole bunch of 1-by-1
Yes.
windows that were stuck on the end of the building in three rows of threes for this exact reason, and they're in closets.
Is that where that came from?
And it lasted one building before we killed it.
so there's, what I'll say is that
That's the same thing.
there are a lot of things other than windows to put on an elevation to give it interest and variety
Yes.
and changes of material and color and whatnot. And I think that there's a lot of ways to be consistent with what you had given in, with the level of detail, the proportion, that was all very pleasing with those previous designs that you brought before this board.
Yes.
That I think you can, I don't see that there's any reason why you can't do that. We just want to see it before it gets
We can do
put in,
that.
I think. So, I think that puts to rest this elevation question. So, Brian, you wanted to add something about
About growth management,
management,
yeah,
sure.
I mean, this is minor, but, I guess it would make sense to go to like page 5, I believe it is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yes, page 5. That second paragraph that talks about affordable housing and the 2016 growth management score. Our approval was for 54 dwelling units affordable, and so that would be the remaining 119, I believe, were market rate. But then it says in the staff report, to uphold 20 points for affordable housing with 173 dwelling units, 70 dwelling units must be affordable. And so I'm not sure, Emily, if you know where our approval was written for 54, how, that number 70 got in there.
Yes, I do know.
Don't tell them.
In the completed questionnaire that's filled out to participate in growth management, it talks about affordable housing, and it has 70 units total at and below 120%. And then within those 70, 35 at 100% AMI and 18 at 80% AMI. So to uphold the 20 points, it is 70 points. Where the 54 units came from is a little confusing and vague in the record. It was allocated 54 dwelling unit equivalents affordable in 2016. And I think it may have been staff confusion in writing that initial staff report where the finding of fact said 54 affordable, but I think it meant the growth management allocation, because it got 54 DUE allocated, but it needs 70 total to be to meet that 20-point threshold.
Yeah, well, I do remember at that growth management meeting that there were some changes that were talked about at the meeting, and I guess we'll have to go back and look at, what we have in our file, but it sounds like if the approval was 54 affordable units and the rest were market rate. The funny thing is all our apartments there, they're all affordable. If you look at the numbers, that we're renting a two-bedroom unit for $1,900. An affordable unit, two-bedroom, can be rented up to $2,400. So all our units are affordable, but we just want to make sure that the finding of fact references the correct number from 2016.
But I would like to know how standards could be so high on the affordable side. I mean, 70 out of 200 units is a pretty high percentage of the project that has to be affordable.
Right, so to meet the 20 points affordable category,
Is that what's required in this district to meet 20?
yeah, to get 20 out of 20 points,
No, wait a minute, that's not what he's asking. I don't believe that's what Al is asking.
It's,
In order to meet the growth management scorecard
yeah,
of getting 20 points out of 20 points, you have to have that high percentage. And you, as I go off the top of my head, you had 86 points out of 100, something along those lines. If you reduced your affordable housing component,
Yes.
you wouldn't score as high. You'd still score,
yeah.
but you don't score as high. So
So how do we get from 54? Because 54 is the number that we've always heard.
Yeah,
And
54
now tonight, for the first time, we're hearing 70.
so 54 was what was allocated at growth management, but to uphold that score of 20 points,
So you-
it needs to be 70
so
total.
So do we
correct me
not,
if I'm wrong, but what you're saying is that from the original growth management allocation, which you don't get everything at once, you just get an initial tranche of units.
Yeah.
54, you got 54. There's still more coming when you come back for more units. Am I getting that correct?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we'll have to take a look at that.
It is absolutely confusing. And again, I would suggest that you spend some quality time with Emily. I've done it, it's really nice. It's, because I think there's more issues than that. It gets even more complicated because of this change to the form-based code, and, what you're vested in, what you're not, and this change to the slow build options. I think there's some things you want to make sure you don't get yourself tripped up on there as well, just, because of the scope of this project and the changes that have made. So I really think it would be to your benefit to understand that as best as possible.
Yeah, and I don't see any major, deal breakers here, especially expecting that some of the existing units probably meet some of those affordable thresholds as is. It's just making sure that the accounting is done so that, when you get to your final phase, there's no surprises.
well, we've been surprised tonight, so you're.
Right, and we want to try to avoid that
Yeah.
to the
Yeah,
greatest extent possible.
yeah, going forward, we try to do this level of accounting with growth management in the score at the original approval. The original approval in 2016, the approval findings were probably more vague than they would be today.
Well, we'll go to class, we'll go back to school and find out.
I'm hopeful that we can get this solidified, certainly in the next several months.
It does seem, based on the staff notes, that you've got 18 dwelling units at or below 80% of area median income. It seems to me, and maybe not to you, but it seems to me that those are the ones that would be the ones that would be most limited in terms of how much you can rent the apartment for. The remainder that you have, 17 dwelling units at 101 to 120 area median income, is higher than market. Right, Brian? I mean, you said so a minute ago, and I would tend to agree with you. And then you've got 35 dwelling units at 81 to 100, which is effectively market. So if you're going to be concerned about anything, it would be the up to the 80% or 80% or below that you have to rent at what is probably below market. But the other ones, everything else is either at or above.
So, and I have a question for staff on this, is that, is there a point at which the applicant needs to designate which units are going to be affordable or where they're located on the site and when they're going to get built? Or can they hold those to the last 54 or 70 units?
They could hold those to the last, it would be documented there in their administrative permit. Or if they want to, you know, retroactively designate some existing units, that would be an administrative permit where it spells out which units and which, doesn't have to be specific units, but within B1, there's 10 at this level, 10 at that level, et cetera.
Are there affordable units that have been allocated and the permit's been issued on has moved into the slow build phase yet? Because it's a certain number of years after you get the permit that if they're not built or the permit hasn't been drawn, then it goes into slow build?
Right, it's to be determined. I think that can be accounted for administratively. We can determine if there's any in the affordable category that are in the slow build that we can't allocate to what's been permitted, then they would be looking at renewing those slow build units in the future. But given that there's likely going to be amendments to Cottonwood in phases 3, 4, and 5, that can be accounted for in the future. It's not a deal breaker at this point in time.
It seems like it's in no one's interest to have that come up at some point where everyone wants to build them, everyone wants them built, and the rules are saying you can only build 3 a year.
Right.
Or 4 a year, or whatever it is.
Yeah, when units slapse into slow build, where a project has more than 20 dwelling unit equivalents allocated, you can pull an administrative permit for 4 DUE a year. So the slow build provision that if you start getting off schedule, smaller projects with, you know, a single family house or a duplex can creep along at that rate and not be held up. But a larger project with an apartment building, you can't pull 4 units a year. In an apartment building, you pull it all at once. That those types of projects go back through the process. Assuming that this happens in the future when form-based code's adopted, form-based code allocation happens administratively rather than having to wait for a hearing in March. That allocation could be shifted administratively with the certificate of conformity. So
that could help.
that could help some of the streamlining of growth management with form-based.
Just to make things more confusing, Hal.
I wish you would say it will help, not it could help.
It will help.
There, she said it. It's on the record.
Streamlining growth management will help.
Good. So,
Much as we'll probably be back in for growth management at some point,
yeah,
fortunately.
Oh, and I will note that those 18 units at 80% AMI, so in that 2019 change, those units no longer need to be shown at the table. So the units at 80% AMI can be built at any time. They're not subject to the sole build. It's only the units at 100% and 120% that are shown in those affordable columns on the table. So it's not like even though you have.
I think we should have made it more
do
complicated.
you want, do you have the P and Z phone number, right?
Yeah.
So, okay. Is there anything else, Brian?
No, I don't think so. Do you have anything else?
So, any other questions from the board on any of the other subjects that are in play?
Good with everything else.
I think we're good. Anything else from you guys?
I don't think so. I think we read through it and
Yeah.
agreed with all the other.
I think we can-
Going it the same
If
way.
if this was approved, I think we can come back with final plans that meet those, pretty much those conditions, so.
No, we'll still meet with the hack, is that correct, or
So
just
if
change
it-
the plans?
If it goes to final plans, it would not go to the hack. It would just be the DRB reviewing the
So
final.
just get you that final plan so that they could review. Okay, that works.
I mean, it's up to you, whether you want to go back, you know,
No,
delay
I
and go
think-
to the hack, and if you think you might get, you know, you could convince them to come up with some different plan.
No, I think if we do what we said, the only thing we can't deliver is that side light. We can change the, you know, the,
I think the board is understanding that the floor plan sometimes keep you from performing some of these things, but I think overall, the hack was correct in saying that it needs to be more similar, more reminiscent of what you had in
and
here.
I think if we had the opportunity to go there, we wouldn't even almost be having these discussions.
I think that's probably true, and we'll talk about that among ourselves.
Okay.
I need to open it up to the audience. Anybody online who has a comment or has a question?
Do raise your hand if you've got a comment to make. We've got no hands raised.
Great. Nobody out there, I can see, lots of shaking heads. So, I
Could have been
think,
worse. No, you could have been like Geico, who didn't go to the court.
so Paul, did you have another question?
It's kind of off conversation.
I could tell. So I'm going to close this hearing at 8:12.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
You did catch that story, didn't you? I guarantee you will never miss a court date again.
All right, thank you, John. Next up is DP 22-10 JC Properties LLC. Jeremy? You're up. Welcome, Jeremy and Doug. For the record, Doug and I are we're neighbors. We live in the same development. I see no conflict with that. For the record, if you both would state your name and address, please.
Jeremy Mazowski, Trudell Consulting Engineers, 478 Blair Park Road.
Doug Goulet, Trudell Consulting Engineers, 240 Southbridge Road, Williston.
Thank you. Staff goes next.
That's me. So this is a pre-application request at 478 Blair Park Road in the Business Park Zoning District. The applicant is proposing a 5,000 square foot office building, additional parking, utilities and landscaping, all to complement an existing office building occupied by Trudell Engineers at the property. Staff is recommending that the DRB take testimony, close the hearing, and allow the project to proceed to discretionary permit stage. And we have drafted some recommendations. We didn't receive any public comments on the proposal. We did receive both fire department and public works comments, which were included as memos to the staff report and as conditions. The proposal meets the dimensional standards and development pattern in the Business Park Zoning District. I'm going to focus on the recommendations we made in this. It is, as Emily mentioned earlier, the Corners form-based code is scheduled for a hearing on July 5th, and it's anticipated that it will be warned on June 16th, which is this Thursday. This is pre-application stage, which means the board should focus on the current standards of the Williston Unified Development Bylaws when writing the pre-application recommendations. Per the bylaws, projects are vested in the current version of the bylaw when a complete discretionary permit is filed. If the DP is filed after the form-based code is warned for a hearing, then it must comply with both the existing proposed bylaws. Obviously, that means this development would be paused for the duration of the hearing until the outcome of that is known. So I guess the sort of upshot of that is that the board should use the current bylaws in making their recommendations, and the applicant doesn't have a huge amount of time to file their DP.
Okay, so Simon, backtrack, please, to rewind to the overlap of current bylaw, form-based code. Here we sit today.
Yep.
It's June 14th. It's before the official warning that is anticipated to be issued on June 16, which would be
Yep.
Thursday of this week.
Correct.
And go over more slowly, please,
Okay.
what that means for this application and how this body, this board, and this applicant is going to be is going to be judged at the DP phase of the process.
Okay, so the select board hearing for the form-based code is scheduled for July 5th, and the warning for that hearing will be issued on June 16th, which is Thursday. As we stand, we must apply the bylaws as they currently exist on this time, i.e. Tuesday, and the board should make their recommendations in line with the current bylaws. You cannot make them in line with the future bylaws because that hearing has not been warned yet. So what that means is that they will have these recommendations, and they must file their discretionary permit in line with those recommendations essentially tomorrow. If they don't do that, then any discretionary permit be considered complete for the duration of the public hearing, which I think is 150 days, has to comply with both sets of bylaws, so the current bylaws and the form-based code bylaws. Now, because those are very different bylaws, it wouldn't be practical to do that. It would be impossible to do that, which essentially means that the applicant would have to wait until the outcome of the select board hearing if they don't make that deadline tomorrow. So
it's from a practical perspective, they're in no man's land. Am I hearing that right?
They become vested if they, in the current bylaws, if they file tomorrow. If they don't,
If they file a DP,
yeah, deal tomorrow.
then it's
But-
considered to be substantially complete.
Yeah,
Yeah, but the meeting minutes
yeah,
from tonight's meeting will not be ratified until our next meeting.
Yep.
And so what we talk about tonight will not be official until we approve the meeting minutes on June 28th.
right.
And so they wouldn't be able to file a DP, okay, tomorrow because they would not have had gone through and had an official pre-app documented and memorialized by approved minutes.
Okay.
Do I have that right?
There's nothing in the bylaw that stops someone submitting a complete discretionary permit prior to receiving their notice of decision.
Okay, let me just ask you, are you going to file a discretionary permit tomorrow?
Yes.
Okay.
I think
Thank you.
from a
Is that called leading the witness?
from a practicality standpoint, you know, you can do two designs. In reality, you're probably just going to pick form-based code, run with that, I would assume.
Doesn't sound it.
Well, I can speak to that. Yeah, we can get into the staff comments. They're pretty light. There's not a lot that I saw that was objective to the project. But essentially, this was a concept that I had been in front of the board with in 2016, where we said our business was growing and, you know, we'd like to consider adding another building on the property. We went to the same sketch level and stopped. And we're back here again, our business is growing, and I think this is a good use of this land to add another office building. And then we had a conversation with staff about the schedule, kind of conversation with my staff about the schedule, and we thought we could get this in under the wire, under the current code. And as it's written in the staff report, you know, then we have the option to look at both. And so that's what I would really like to have. I like to have options, so. We'll wait till I don't think I'm building this before form-based code gets adopted. So, you know, we'll be able to look at that code and apply it and determine whether we move forward with the design that hopefully is approved under the old code or whether we think it's better to go into this one.
Have you, that's not the way I understand this process. When does form-based code start to dictate how the applicant moves forward?
With this, the zoning administrator has to apply both the current bylaws and the form-based code. So
You don't get a choice. You have to apply both,
you have to
correct?
apply both. So for minor things like sign permits, change of use, very, very minor additions or shed type things, those types of permits will be able to go through under both versions of the bylaw. It's major things that the form-based, where you can't meet both at the same time. It's basically called the zoning vortex, where large stuff freezes during this review process. The staff precedent has been with, once something has its pre-application hearing, we'll accept that discretionary permit application. The same way as we'll accept final plans and permits while something's still in its state appeal period. It's kind of at your own risk if permits get appealed or minutes get changed, that you'd have to rectify those things. But we'll accept a complete discretionary permit till 4:30 p.m. tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay, from a practical perspective though, and my apologies because it doesn't apply to your project. An applicant is not going to be able to comply with both sets. And both sets of regs. And so doesn't that in essence just suspend DRB activity for a period of time?
For projects in the TAP phase, in the TAP one.
Right,
Yeah.
right, where form-based code is limited to. So, do our future agendas on the DRB, are they just, do they reflect that reality, and are they pushed out until a point in time where only one set of regulations dictate the Taft Corners area?
Pretty much, and if form-based code gets adopted, then those permit reviews will happen as a certificate of conformity. So if form-based code is adopted, the DRB would review major boundary line adjustments or subdivisions and plats for streets, but you wouldn't be reviewing architectural design within the form-based code overlay district.
Ever again?
Unless an administrator's decision is appealed, which would be appealed to the DRB.
So you're the grand finale.
Great.
Have you been in, not to take anything away from the staff that is here, but have you been in and talked to Matt?
About this project?
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah, we talked about.
And in conjunction or in relation to form-based code and how it relates to this?
Yeah, our understanding was that we have the option to proceed if we can get discretionary permit or if we can get pre-approval tonight verbally, and then we can submit our DP application tomorrow and it's deemed complete.
Legally, we can't give pre-app approval because we're not voting on it. It's got to get warned. You can't do that.
What do you mean?
I don't understand what you just
Well,
said.
we can, until we get the minutes back and vote on the minutes, we don't, you said it yourself, pre-app doesn't get put into force. You can't, the board can't grant a pre-application approval without going through the process of voting on the minutes.
So what I just heard was if we come out of deliberation and we and we approve this preliminary in front of us, the applicant has the option of taking the risk that nothing's going to change when we approve the minutes in 2 weeks. That's what I just heard. Did I have that right, Steph?
Right.
Yeah, they get the break ground, and then if someone decides to appeal them, then they kind of go, But if nobody appeals them, they can continue along.
We're not talking about breaking ground. We're not talking about appealing. We're talking about the 2-week window of a risk in our approval of the meeting minutes. That's all we're talking about here.
Well, and I think that the other thing, and Simon brought this up, and I think that I guess I'd like to echo it, is that the applicant does not need to go through pre-app. The applicant can go directly to discretionary permit without pre-app and take their chances for an up or down vote. Pre-app is right? Pre-app is wholly there to get some guidance from the board. Right? You have the option of coming into front of the board for discretionary permit and showing the board what you're going to do, and you take the risk of, up or down. There's nothing in between. Pre-app allows.
I wasn't aware that I had that option, but
You do have
I'm
that.
happy to do.
So, I mean, if you can get a pre-app, you gotta get the discretionary permit in front of the board, which we don't meet again for 2 weeks.
No, but it's just when it's deemed.
No, it's just a matter of having it received by the town of Williston tomorrow,
At 4:30.
prior to the warning.
Right,
And it
pre-application,
doesn't have to be in front of us. We don't have to hear it. Well, it just has to be on file
All right.
as
Just
being
like
submitted.
the big one we dropped off last.
Yeah,
So the risk though is, right, if we change anything. I guess I don't know what the risk is.
well,
the risk is that we come out of deliberation and we have, we either accept these recommendations or amend them, and they're listening, and they're taking the risk that what we say tonight verbally is what's going to be represented in the approved minutes in 2 weeks. They're assuming that risk.
and, there you go.
And if it's not, there's no recourse.
Well, they could always go through a DP hearing, and then you could have the option of continuing it if there was still something that needed to be discussed.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's really outside of, I hear you. That's really outside of what we're talking about tonight. We're trying to understand how the applicant can file their DP tomorrow and what that means in terms of the regulation that will govern and what risk they're assuming by doing that. And I think I'm clear on it.
I think so. I am.
I think that the risk is less that we're going to change the minutes, because that's just something we're all going to look back at the recording and say whether we said it or not.
I never have, I don't
So-
view that as a
I think
risk.
the bigger risk is that the DP that comes in after limited opportunity to respond to the comments that you get tonight might be such that we would not then approve that project at DP because it's not responsive enough to what we say tonight. I think that's the real risk, because if that were to happen, now you'd have to put a new application in, and it would not have made it in by tomorrow afternoon.
So what
I'm
our,
confident that we can have this discussion.
Or we could continue it.
so what our bylaw says is that pre-application review for this type of development, pre-application review is required for a discretionary permit. If they submit a discretionary permit application tomorrow that does not meet some of the pre-app recommendations, that's okay, because pre-app is just a list of recommendations. It's not approval or denial. Now, that does mean when they get to their discretionary permit, there might be some continuances or adjustments made. But because if they file a discretionary permit tomorrow, they're vested in the old bylaws, and that discretionary permit review that would be taking place sometime probably in July would be based on these current bylaws. And it's happened several times where projects, they have their pre-application review, and then within a couple days, or there's no DRB hearing, so the minutes are approved for the month and they file their discretionary permit application. We're just calling to light these, semantics, because the form-based code is such a major thing that could have legal ramifications for the town.
Okay, I'm clear. Are you clear?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I assume staff, this is all based on state statute as far as the process. I assume the staff is following state statute with what we're hearing tonight.
Okay. You good, John?
I'm fine.
Yeah.
I'm thinking these guys probably just have a spot in the office that says bang head here, but
You mean the same sign that we all have in
Yeah.
our respective offices? Okay. Okay. So, with that being said, is there any more, before we go into questions of the specifics of this application.
Did Simon?
Did you finish, Simon?
Well, I got about 20% of the way through.
I so derailed you. I'm so sorry.
I'm grateful Emily and Melinda are here.
Okay, continue, Simon.
Okay, so I'm just going to touch on the recommendations, which is not to submit a traffic study, but to provide us with traffic generation data in terms of Chapter 13 on access, connectivity, traffic studies. On parking, there is a recommendation. The applicant was proposing 2 additional short-term parking spaces based on the maximum parking requirements. We are suggesting they provide 3, which sort of net result means they need to provide an extra 2 based on them having 4 existing racks. And they should also be providing 1 end-of-trip facility. In terms of maintenance, they have shown solid waste storage in an appropriate location based on our bylaws. There's a minor conflict with a retained maple tree that should just be clarified. The fire department have made a recommendation that the trash enclosure is sited 30 feet from any structure. Just the point that the development bylaws do not require this. So in terms of the development bylaws, it is acceptable where it is, but the applicant is encouraged to discuss the location with the fire chief to try and come up with a acceptable location from their point of view. There's a recommendation that the HVAC and solid waste enclosures both be screened. The proposal was presented to the HAC last week. In general, they found that the building did comply with the bylaws. They noted that the original building was constructed some 40 years ago, and therefore they made the recommendation, which is included, that some variation of colour or material be included to differentiate the buildings but make them complementary. On landscaping, so the recommendation is that they submit a plan that demonstrates compliance with the bylaws. So they're proposing a type 3 9-foot buffer to the west boundary, which is the top boundary that you see along here. There's some good screening to the parking lot, but we're going to recommend that they provide a bit more additional screening to meet the requirements to buffer adjoining the building. On the northern boundary, the buffer is constrained by the overhead wires, and with the recent construction of the high-density residential, it does change that buffer to a 23-foot buffer, given the sort of limited scope of development at that end of the property, and that the buffer actually provides some pretty good screening already, recommending that that's left with no additional planting. And then lastly, the sort of east and south buffers, which is a type 4 buffer, so a parkland setting, down in the southern corner where the new proposed building is. It provides good screening. There's roughly 200 feet there, so it sort of meets the requirements for type 4 buffer with enough mature trees. I was going to suggest that the applicant clarifies, as part of the landscaping plan, that gas pipe sort of here, that's routed through the canopy of that retained tree, just does not affect the integrity of the buffer. Moving further along to the north, there is a notation here that the utility box might need to be upgraded. If as a result of this development that results in a larger box, that does need to be screened with the bylaw. And then this area here is sort of fairly open at the moment. We're sort of looking at over 200 feet of road frontage, and there's only sort of 3 mature trees along there at the moment. So that's something really for the DRB to discuss, but in my view it would be helpful to have some additional mature trees there to strengthen the buffer and meet the type 4 requirements. And then lastly, I think we just have a couple of additional recommendations on erosion control and outdoor lighting. So in summary, it is recommended to proceed to discretionary permit with the recommendations as drafted. That's it.
Okay. Excellent demonstration of patience, Simon, with the chair. And thank you to Doug and Jeremy for the informality of that discussion. We were in an area that we're just not familiar with. So I wanted to make sure.
Appreciate you clarifying that. You gave me a little bit of a heart palpitation there.
I wanted to make sure that the board and you understood.
Absolutely.
And so that there weren't any surprises. So that was
Appreciate
that was what I was trying to do there.
Thank you.
And so with that, I'd like to turn it over to you.
Thank you.
To talk a little bit about the project, and also if you have any concern about the recommendations that are in the staff report.
All right, thank you very much. So as I said earlier, this is a concept plan that we had thought about several years back, and the economics just weren't right at the time, so I let it simmer in the background, and then the circumstances were such, both with the economy, the growth of my business, the need for more, I think, good office space in this park, and just kind of my vision for what to do with this property. The stars aligned, and we pulled this back out, and I looked back at the design that Lewis Creek Company had actually come up with. They're not a formal architect, but I was happy with the concept plans that they developed at the time. I think this was a few years ago. Originally, when we came in, I think we had a more generic type office building, similar to the ones that are across the street where Rack Warehouse and can't remember the other business up in there, but the speaker place, the stereo place. They're kind of generic. So we were originally going to emulate those. But like I said, Lewis Creek did a nice job coming up with a contemporary design that I thought played off of the very unique contemporary building that we occupy now. Little history lesson, that was the first building in Blair Park. And I've been told it was the second office building in Path Corners, the first being O'Brien's, which is still there. I've got pictures to prove it. It looked like there was literally nothing between this building and the interstate when it was built. So a little context, if you think about all the stuff that's been built now, it's pretty amazing. We've been there since it was built. Dick Trudell built that building with buying the first lot from the Blairs and developed the park. Like I said, we're using, as Doug can attest to, we're using every inch of the existing office building and then some. And so, we're trying to prepare ourselves for future growth. I would love to think that I can occupy 100% of this office building on day one. The reality is it probably needs to be a multi-tenant space. But that hasn't been decided. Really, we'll boil down to the economics and when we actually pull the trigger on constructing this, if granted the approvals to do so. And again, so we've looked at the site. One of the biggest challenges that we've always had with this site is sort of the dead end parking lot. All service vehicles have to, especially of anything of any size, has to actually back down all the way into the property, which is not ideal. So I've always liked this idea of having a circular circulation pattern to the site. I think it'll primarily act as a one-way if it was a single tenant business, but we've designed it so it could be two-way circulation in case there was a reason not to go around and just access say, a different use in the front building. Parking is a premium just because we're also using every inch of the building. So we're adding parking, and the type of business that we do, we have a lot of extra vehicles. We have survey vehicles, company cars for various types of technicians. So we find that we're challenged often with parking, which is why we're asking for a little bit more than the minimum. And we've designated some spaces for storage. And we occasionally have to use trailers for off-road vehicles, and having the ability to store those in an appropriate place. Usually they're inside the garage, but occasionally we need to store those. So that's why we've added this little storage area. The stormwater, we've actually designed back when the state stormwater rules were in flux, and we also had this concept in play. So we have a state stormwater permit already for all of this impervious. We just haven't pulled the trigger on constructing the new pond that would be behind the garage. And for the new building, as I said, there's some conceptual plans here. I think we obviously need to work on these if we move forward with construction, but I think they're suitable for getting the concept that I like. It's a 4,200 square feet with a mezzanine level. And I wanted a more open concept. The existing building's very 80s box. You know, everybody has their individual offices, so this is much more of a flexible floor plan where we hope we can accommodate different uses over time without having to move rigid walls. Yeah, so again, and then the only thing that's not clearly depicted here, I don't think, is that we're contemplating maybe adding a full basement to it, just because, again, the type of business we have a lot of file storage, so we're kind of running out of places to put boxes. So we've contemplated adding and I think it's shown here, a staircase on that west side to access the below grade level, and that would primarily be storage, not intended for, at this time anyway, I don't think it would be office space, it would just be storage. So that's, and obviously we wanted to preserve as much, the 40 years that this building has been sitting here, all of the trees, as I understood it, were transplanted from Jim McCullough's property by Dick Trudell himself and tractored over here and planted, and now some of them are, you know, full, mature, very large, beautiful trees. So we've got some oaks and some maples, some big white pines, and yes, we're not going to put the gas line through the white pine tree. We're going to reroute that on the site plan. And screen the transformer, all of that. We didn't see any real objections to the staff comments that I saw. Trash location, we're contemplating a change where we might move that adjacent to the garage, in that little back area. We could do a little enclosure there. We don't need a dumpster. We occupy the 6,400 square feet now with just a couple of recycling bins and a single trash rollaway. I wouldn't envision needing much more than that for the new building, so we'll just comply with the recommendations to move that away from the structure. And another note, and if you haven't driven by there lately, we just did a very major upgrade to this building. This building was tired and in very, very poor shape. So invested a significant amount of money in improving the structure, making it energy efficient, replaced all the windows, replaced all the siding, did full envelope wrap, air sealing, and reduced the amount of glass. That was because it was originally designed as passive solar. So if you get a chance, the project that you guys approved a few years ago in 2019 is now complete, and we're pretty proud of it. Did I miss anything?
No, I think in general, we've gone through the staff report and made the plan changes to reflect what was requested, whether it be landscaping, lighting. There's a full set of civil plans are need to be submitted that address all the staff comments. So, yeah, I don't think we had any issues with any of those comments with regards to technical aspects or anything else.
Okay, thank you. DRB members, questions?
I just wanted to comment, I like the design of the building too, it looks sharp, and I think it'll be a nice touch to that area. Will you have any EV parking, or looking at adding any EV parking to the parking lot?
Absolutely, yeah. I believe it'll be a requirement of our Act 250 anyway, but we don't have any now, but I definitely think that's something we might not have addressed, we need to put on the plan. I'd like to someday have a electric car, so I've been working here for a long time, this would be a good place to charge it as any. And we actually do have one employee that has a full electric, so that's a great suggestion, thank you.
You need an elevator for your ADA compliance, but to get to your loft.
Ask him, I'm not sure that's true.
Really?
I'm not sure that's true. But
Really?
I'm sure that their design team will be looking at that and keeping them in full compliance.
Interesting.
There's a ratio, right?
There's square foot triggers, and
Ah,
it's not necessarily a second floor that just triggers it.
That's why
There's
it's called
plenty of fine print.
oh, okay.
There
So
are
you don't
rules.
call it a loft, you call it a mezzanine.
There's very specific rules for mezzanine,
Okay.
including maximum sizes, so.
But as a point of clarification, that's outside of the purview of
Yes,
the
it
DRB.
is.
Any other
Free
questions?
architectural advice.
We try to avoid that. No, we don't always succeed.
Hey, no? Nate?
Good.
Okay. David, you good?
I'm good.
Paul, you good?
I got some.
Okay. John?
So this is a nice three-sided site. So are we clear on what's front setbacks and sides and rears? I think I'd just like to establish that now so that as we go into
I think I've got,
future.
one front and two sides myself. but
Just
I'm not
fast
sure.
and clear. I would get the front, the curved one, I would say was the front.
Right.
You know, along the street.
Yeah.
And so then it begs the question of whether that should have street trees.
And
that was-
I know Lucy, our landscape architect, has been working on that.
Okay, good.
So we'll see some street trees.
All right, so, and now at the risk of getting into the architectural
Please.
piece, you know, it is a contemporary building. It's one that I think has gotten surprisingly little, no, I shouldn't say surprisingly, reassuringly little criticism over the years. You know, it was a very nicely done building. I think that people are, you know, they recognize it as a contemporary building. And, you know, I think it's great that you've upgraded it and kept it kind of consistent with what it always was. I'm looking at the site plan, and the new building looks to be significantly bigger footprint. Is that right?
It is, but it's not so that's why we included there's renderings.
Right, yeah, okay.
So I think scale wise, you're right. The new building is the larger footprint,
Right,
but massing wise, I felt like when I looked at all the renderings, and we actually have a link
Right.
to a 3D site
Right.
where we rendered the whole thing, but my hope is that by, our existing building is almost 3 stories tall, plus a very large passive solar tower. So it has this large mass to it, and I wanted that building to still be the alpha and this to be the beta. And that was part of not wanting to go at my first blush at form-based code and have to have some massive 3-story brick building right along the front of a curved road, where this one has more flexibility in terms of not being a true 2-story, and being hopefully able to fit into the landscaping, because one of our primary goals here, if you've been to our property, it's really mature. It feels like a park. I mean, like the kids from the daycare come up and picnic on our lawn because it feels like a park.
right.
So while this will eliminate some of that internally, there won't be quite as much lawn area anymore. We tried to maintain as much as possible the landscaping berms that have been developed, the mature trees along the streetscape, and sort of the overall appearance. So by tucking this into that lower portion of the lot in the front yard, I'm hoping that, and that's why we did, I think there's some 3D renderings from the street too, it really will blend in a little bit more than.
And, you know, blending in is fine if that's your intent, I mean, but to have another, you're going to have another contemporary shaped building there, and you need to be careful how the interplay is with the two. And, you know, I appreciate you saying you don't want it to kind of overwhelm the original one, but it is bigger. And it's a lot bigger, in terms of the footprint and therefore the math. So I would say it's important to think about how much blank wall there is in between windows, the scale of the windows to the wall, because the proportions and the detailing of your original building, I think, are quite nice, and I think people are very comfortable with it. So it's just, I think, I appreciate you taking on this challenge, but it's not as simple as doing the colonial Williamsburg, you know, spec development office building that you see over in Virginia or Maryland. So it's a challenge, and I commend you for taking it on, but, you know, I think you need to think about it.
Yeah, and my inspiration was a little bit the rehab gym. I mean, they didn't go with the cookie cutter project, right? They went with something that was, and just like Dick did back in the day, you know, it wasn't colonial. It was, let's do something interesting.
So again, they're clearly going to be relating to each other, and they're going to create a campus. So it's also the spaces in between, which I've said in this forum before, that are important.
Thank you.
That's
I appreciate that.
That's just a pre-up comment.
Okay. Any comments from the public?
If you'd like to make a comment, please raise your hand, either on Zoom. We've got no raised hands. And no
Okay.
hands.
Any final questions, comments from the DRB? Any final questions, comments from applicant? Okay, very good. We are going to close DP 22-10 at 8:52. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Okay. Next up, final item on the public hearing agenda is the appeal of the zoning administrator's opinion and zoning violation warning letter of March 18th, 2022. Who is present for this hearing?
Reed Carr here.
Hi, Reed. Will you please state your address, please?
Yep, resident at 77 Penny Lane, owner at 21 Center Street, within the hamlet.
Thank you. Looks like Brett, you're here as well.
Yeah, Brett Grabowski, 32 Seymour Street, Williston, Vermont, 05495.
Thank you.
Pete, I'm going to recuse myself.
Okay. So Scott Riley has recused himself because he's in a butter to this property. And Belinda, this is yours. And if you could take it from here, that'd be great.
Yep. So I'm not going to rehash this entire staff report because, you know, because this was heard on May 10th, 2022. I'm going to give an overview and then jump right to the site visit. So this is an appeal of the zoning administrator's issuance of a zoning violation warning and administrator opinion letter dated March 18th, 2022. The letter relates to landscaping in a development called the Hamlet, and encompassing Center Street, Day Lane, Madison Ave, Madison Drive, Jakes Way, Seymour Street, Zephyr Road. Per state statute, any decision of the administrator may be appealed to the DRB. The DRB must hold a public hearing. Following the hearing, they may uphold, modify, or overturn the decision of the administrator. And in every case, the DRB shall adopt written findings and conclusions supporting its action. And the DRB's decision on an appeal can be appealed to the Vermont Environmental Court. So This was presented and heard by the DRB at the last DRB meeting on May 10th. And the DRB conducted a site visit on May 24th. The DRB and appellant and appellee and staff walked around the site. I provided a table that summarizes the site visit, the areas that were looked at, and the discussion, just very generalized, that was had. And let's see, comment letter was received by Ron Bomer on May 4th, 2022. The lead presented a response on May 9th, 2022. It's this staff's opinion that the SUB 0403 final plans and conditions of approval control the landscaping on the site, except that there was a condition allowing a lot of flexibility with the landscaping and allowed the landscaping to be changed with staff approval, in other words, to be processed administratively as a minor change. And I think it's been understood that over time, there have been quite a few minor changes to the landscaping that have been approved administratively. So the appeal was really quite narrow in scope. It really focused on two issues: whether landscaping around individual units should have been accepted as complete when CCs were issued for those units, and whether landscaping should be required within the mid-block common land located between Center Street, Day Lane, Seymour Street, and Madison Drive. So there was a permit that was issued originally for the landscaping and site improvements, ZP 0722. It did not explicitly require an inspection and certificate of compliance. So staff is recommending that the DRB make a finding that a certificate of compliance is not required for the site improvements under ZP 0722. And it would be difficult to issue a CC at this point for the entire site due to the nature of these various site plan amendments and administrative changes in landscaping over time. So also a technical amendment to the subdivision plat was made in 2008 under DP 0802 that created individual footprint lots for the single family homes. So it does seem appropriate to staff that the administrator include the landscaping with the issuance of the CCs for individual units, that the landscaping around those units would have been accepted with the issuance of CCs for those units. And that once the CC is issued for a unit and was not appealed, the DRB and or administrator can't require further improvements to that unit. And regarding the second issue about the common land, staff is of the opinion that not requiring landscaping in that common land was probably an oversight at the time, and that the landscaping wasn't revised as part of the approval to shift the location of those buildings, of those units to Building Z. And so minus those revisions, the original final plans prevail. However, changes can be made administratively if the developer is amenable to making those changes and putting some landscaping in that area. And staff is recommending that the developer and the HOA work together to come up with a landscaping plan that satisfies all concerned, and do that with approval of staff. And there were other areas visited in the site plan. There was the area around the gazebo, area number 4. It's staff's opinion that the landscaping plan under the amendment DPO 813 controls the landscaping for that area and supersedes the original landscaping plan. And it appears to be, the landscaping appears to be in compliance with that amended landscaping plan. And then as far as area number 5, where the 2 units are still being constructed, the landscaping behind those units can be looked at when the CCs are issued for those units. So I have written some draft conclusions of law and proposed motions to either uphold, modify, or overturn the administrator's decision. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. I have a question for Brett Reed. When we did the site visit, there was a plan that had been recently developed at the time of the site walk, showing some additional landscaping. And we had a conversation during the site walk about the parties getting together and reviewing that plan, and with the goal of reaching an agreement of swapping out some species for another species and so on. Has there been any progress made on getting the parties together to have that conversation?
No, there hasn't. There hasn't at this point. We're really waiting. I'm waiting upon basically to see the staff comments on all the issues that were brought up. I'm inclined. I mean, as you know, I'm in agreement with staff's recommendations here with the motions. In regards to the conclusions of law, there's a bunch of is or does nots that I think staff can guide the board through to comply with what their comments are, what their suggestions are. And then my suggestion would be, and I believe it probably would be staff's as well, in regards to what their comments are, in line with their comments, is to modify under the proposed motions to modify with the language that is written, as written in the modify motion.
Okay, thank you. Reed, do you have anything to add that I don't want to, don't state your position that's already been stated from the past, but do you have anything that would be new in an update to anything that you have previously conveyed to this body?
Yeah, I do have 2 updates for you, and I will be brief. I had an email exchange recently with staff about this. Those updates are that first, regarding sheet SK1 from DP 0813, which was governing the gazebo landscaping. It just wasn't sitting right, what we were talking about on the site visit and in staff's, Melinda's email response about this. It just didn't seem right to me why that SK1 sheet would govern everything on the sheet, but I couldn't figure out why. So I went back and read everything from that DRB meetings minutes, looked back at those revised plans, and it seems pretty clear that it was not intended to govern anything except for the landscaping directly adjacent to the gazebo. And that item on that revised plan is specifically labeled as landscaping plan at gazebo. And if you look, I don't know if it's something that can be put up on the screen by staff, but if you look at sheet SK1, it's not reasonable to assume that landscaping to the north and south of the gazebo at the corners of those lots that were intended to provide privacy to the backs of those lots were removed during SK1 and the DPO 813. And one of the ways you can tell that is if you look at the Madison Drive area at the bottom of that sheet, it doesn't show any of the street landscaping. It doesn't show any of the landscaping which Brett has installed, including the landscaping around electrical boxes and in the fronts and sides of units. So it doesn't make any sense that all of the landscaping, even along the road, would be omitted, and yet sheet SK1 should apply to everything that's depicted because it's inconsistent. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. And there was, I'll just pause there. Are there any questions about that before I comment on another update?
I don't believe so. Continue, please.
So the other item that I was looking into to try to get an answer was around the lot boundaries. And let me pause for a second to find here. I'm just reading from Melinda's response earlier this week, which was that staff attempted to do an overlay, but quickly found that it was not possible to do it with accuracy based on the GIS parcel files. And it would be more accurate to use property boundary descriptions in warranty deeds for each unit, or the description in the HOA covenants or declaration on what extent the unit footprint consists of. I was disappointed that there wasn't, that staff wasn't able to show what of these landscaping elements actually fall within private lots. And so I have attempted to do what Melinda had indicated, which is I've taken a look back at our association declaration to see what it says about lot boundaries. And what it says is that the boundaries of lots shall be the building envelope lot lines depicted on the revised plat. So lot boundaries and building envelopes are synonymous. And so the question really becomes, where are those building envelopes? And from the very beginning of this development, it was identified that there are significant issues with the ability to locate specific things. The subdivision 403 approval meeting minutes indicate that despite clear requests, the footprints of the proposed houses haven't been drawn on the site plans, and the shapes described are essentially building envelopes. The lack of coordination between architectural and engineering drawings causes concern for the accuracy of the plans. It's especially difficult to review things like window adjacency issues. And on top of that, at the time, markers were required to be installed and were not installed at the corners of those lots / building envelopes. As a result, it's just not possible to easily determine what is within or not within those specific lot boundaries. And so I just want to step back for a second and think about common sense here. And the trees and shrubs that we have brought forward indicating that they are missing from the original landscaping plan, they are not up against buildings. They are intended to be common elements, and our declaration says that common elements are intended to be owned by the association and maintained by the association. And the list of things that count as common elements specifically says that it includes trees, shrubs, landscaping, and other site improvements located on the property. So trees and shrubs are not private elements, they are common elements. And the ones that we have identified as being missing on the map that was provided are not adjacent, they're not up against buildings, they're set away from buildings, and there's roughly 50 of them. So I just wanted to provide what I found when I tried to understand why we couldn't locate where those boundaries were, and perhaps how we should interpret the ones that we have marked. I'll pause there.
Okay, thank you.
I'll respond to that really quickly. It's a convenient interpretation on Reed's part for this, but that was all part of the original approval 13, 14 years ago. And those concerns by DK Johnson at the time were resolved, and that's how the original approval or the original project was approved, because we resolved some of those issues. But the one thing that staff did bring up that Reed is not bringing up is there was an amendment after those concerns were brought up, or after the project was originally approved, there was an amendment which actually defined lot boundaries with a plat. Originally, this project was proposed as a condominium, and it was just everything was in common, the entire project. And there were basically single family home condominium units, but then the plans were amended and created actual lot lines that staff has pointed out, to bring to the conclusion that basically the elements are directly around units are actually part of the CC conditional approval CC issues, CC certificates that were granted on an individual house basis. Another issue to Reed's in response is some of the units that is referring to around the gazebo area. Some of those units that were in close proximity to those houses, which I argue were actually on the lot lines or within the lots of the individual units once they were proposed, were also eliminated because they originally there were to provide screening because of the original design. The units were extremely close together. If you look back at the original approval, your backyards were a matter of feet apart. And so part of the revision to create Building Z and to eliminate all of these units were to create a much larger open space. And part of that open space remained to be open. So I'm in agreement with staff's recommendations and would request that the board move to approve staff's motion to modify the zoning administrator's a letter, and the motion here to modify, or the language to modify, I think is certainly adequate.
Okay, thank you. Before closing, any last comments, questions?
No.
No.
Okay. I'm going to close APP.
I think, sorry, before we do, Reed, you've got your hand raised.
Oh, I missed that step. So other members of the public with comments. Thank you, Simon.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that I've also read I'm aware of the changes that took place that Brett mentioned. And in the meeting minutes where the DP 0813 was approved, including the revised plan, which included SK1 for the gazebo area, there's no mention of removal of any landscaping for other units, only the replacement of those units with a gazebo and a map that's labeled landscaping at gazebo, not landscaping for that block or landscaping for that area, but landscaping at the gazebo. And even that is missing 3 elements that were supposed to have been installed. So I just wanted to address that.
Okay, thank you. Any raised hands from the public, public comments?
Please do raise your hand if you want to comment or send me a message. No raised hands or chats.
Okay, I'm going to close APP 22-02 at 9:15. Thank you very much. Okay, that concludes our public hearing. We're now going to go into deliberative session at 9:15. Thank you. For Tuesday, June 14th, 2022. We have concluded our deliberative session. HP 22-03 will be continued until June 28th, 2022 at our next DRB meeting. Is there a motion for DP 16-05.4?
Yes. As authorized by WDB 6.6.3, I, Scott Riley, move that the Williston Development Review Board, having reviewed the application submitted and all accompanying materials, including the recommendations of the town staff and the advisory boards required to comment on this application by the Williston Development Bylaw, and having heard and duly considered the testimony presented at the public hearing of June 14, 2022, accept the findings of fact and conclusions of law for DP 16-05.4 and approve this discretionary permit subject to the conditions of approval above. This approval authorizes the applicant to file final plans, obtain approval of these plans from the Development Review Board, and then seek an administrative permit for the proposed development, which must proceed in strict conformance with the plans on which this approval is based. We are modifying conditions of approval number 3A by striking the doorway side light, and 3B by striking the same doorway side lights.
Thank you, Scott. Is there a second?
Second.
Paul seconds it. Any further discussion?
Nope.
Yay or nay? Paul?
Yay.
John Hemmelgarn?
Yay.
Scott Riley?
Yay.
Dave Turner?
Yay.
Nate Andrews?
Yay.
The chair recuses himself. That's 5 in favor, none opposed, 1 member recused. Motion carries. Next up is DP 22-10. Is there a motion?
Yes. As authorized by WDB 6.6.3, I, David Turner, move the Williston Development Review Board, having reviewed the application submitted and all accompanying materials, including the recommendations, town staff, and the advisory boards required to comment on this application by the Williston Development Bylaw, and having heard and duly considered the testimony presented at the public hearing of June 14, 2022, accept the recommendations of DP 22-10 and authorize this application to move forward to discretionary permit review.
Thank you, David. Is there a second?
Second.
John seconds it. Any further discussion? Yay or nay? Paul?
Yay.
John?
Yay.
Scott? Dave?
Yay.
Nate?
Yay.
Chair is a yay. 6 in favor, none opposed. Motion carries. Is there a motion for the appeal 22-02?
Yes. As authorized by WDB 5.4.6, I, John Hemmelgarn, move that the Williston Development Review Board, having reviewed the appeal of the administrator's decision, all of the accompanying materials, and having heard and duly considered the testimony presented at the public hearings of May 10th and June 14th, 2022, accept the findings of fact and conclusions of law for APP 22-02, an appeal of an administrator's opinion letter, and modify the decision of the administrator to issue the opinion letter as follows. Landscaping within mid-block common land ID 08COM.06600B, located between Center Street, Day Lane, Seymour Street, Madison Drive. Landscaping adjacent to units 65, 66, 69, and 70 was assumed by ORB to be not required when those units were shifted to Building C under July 12, 2011 approval of DP 08-13 amendment, is modified as follows. Landscaping within mid-block common land, ID 08COM.06600B, located between Center Street, Day Lane, Seymour Street, Madison Drive. Landscaping adjacent to units 65, 66, 69, and 70 is required in accordance with the Plan SK2 prepared by the appellee dated May 13th, 2022, or as modified by agreement of appellant and appellee and approved by the zoning administrator. We also are going to provide the following conclusions of law. I'm going to read them all. 1, the zoning administrator's opinion letter dated March 18th, 2022 does accurately represent statements of fact and conclusions of law regarding the matters of landscaping, street trees, sidewalks, and snow storage. Number 2, landscaping on private land directly adjacent to a unit that has received a final certificate of compliance is accepted as complete. Number 3, ZP 07-22 does not require an inspection and certificate of compliance. Number 4, landscaping within mid-block common land, ID 08COM.06600B, located between Center Street, Day Lane, Seymour Street, and Madison Drive, is not controlled by SUB 04-03, a 45-page plan set signed January 23rd, 2007. Number 5, landscaping around the gazebo is controlled by sheet SK1 on page 7 of 17, DP 08-13 / SUB 04-03 amendment. Final plan signed August 20th, 2021.
Thank you, John. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Dave Turner seconds it. Any further discussion? Yay or nay? Paul?
Yay.
John Hemmelgarn?
Yay.
Scott Riley has recused himself. Dave Turner?
Yay.
Nate Andrews?
Yay.
The chair is a yay. That's 5 in favor, none opposed, 1 recusal. Motion carries. Is there a motion to accept the meeting minutes as drafted dated May 24th, 2022?
So moved.
Paul made a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Scott made, he was quiet, but Scott actually beat you to it. He made a second. Is there any further discussion?
No.
Yay or nay? Paul Christensen?
Yay.
John?
Yay.
Scott? Dave?
Yay.
Nate?
Yay.
Chair's a yay. 6 in favor, none opposed. Motion carries. Is there, minutes are approved. Is there any other business to bring forth tonight? Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn? Scott, is there a second?
Second, of course.
John, second. All those in favor?
Yay.
Aye. Thank you all.